The woman cleaning my office window wrote, "Dinner?" in the soap 18 floors above the street. Then she waited for my answer. My name is Miles Bennett. I was 34 and worked in medical supply logistics, which meant my days were spent making sure boxes reached hospitals before anyone had a reason to learn my name. It was steady work, important work, mostly invisible when done well. I understood invisible. My desk sat beside a sealed window on the 18th floor of a downtown office tower. The glass did not open. It reflected my face at night and turned the city into something that looked close enough to touch while remaining several inches of laminated safety glass away. That October, the building hired a high-rise cleaning crew for the first complete exterior wash in almost a year. The woman on my side of the tower first appeared outside the conference room on a Monday morning. She descended past the glass on 2 separate ropes, wearing a harness, helmet, dark work clothes, and a bright blue jacket. A bucket hung below her. Her tools were clipped where she could reach them without searching. I knew almost nothing about rope work, but I planned deliveries for a living. I recognized preparation when I saw it. She checked her position, settled her feet against the facade, wet the first pane with an applicator, and pulled a squeegee across it in clean, overlapping strokes. Nobody in the conference room noticed her for nearly a minute. Then 6 people turned at once. She gave them a small wave and kept working. I was carrying inventory projections to the meeting. She glanced at my stack of paper, looked through the glass at the display screen showing a grid of delayed shipments, and made a sympathetic face. I held up the papers as if they explained my choices. She pointed down at her bucket, then at my papers, and raised one eyebrow. Her job was harder to do in the wind. Mine involved more columns. We both seemed willing to call it even. By Wednesday, I had learned the rhythm of the crew. They started from the roof after the anchors and lines were checked. They worked one vertical section at a time. A controlled area at street level kept pedestrians away from anything that might fall. When the wind rose beyond whatever limit their plan allowed, they stopped. The woman in the blue jacket never performed for people behind the glass. She did not bounce on the rope or lean away for effect. Every movement was measured. She also noticed that I ate lunch at my desk at 2:30. On Wednesday afternoon, she arrived outside my window while I was holding a sandwich in one hand and correcting a refrigerated shipment route with the other. She pointed at the sandwich. Then she pointed at the clock on my wall. I shrugged. She shook her head with professional disappointment. I wrote "late truck" on a sheet of paper and held it up. She read it, nodded once, and wrote "eat" on the wet glass with one gloved finger. Then she erased the word with the squeegee. On Thursday, I brought lunch at noon. When she reached my window, I held up the container. She gave me a thumbs up. I wrote "your turn" on paper and pointed toward the small pouch clipped near her hip. She opened it and showed me a wrapped energy bar. It was not a conversation in any normal sense. We did not know each other's names. The glass blocked every sound. For all I knew, she had a partner, a spouse, or a strict personal rule against men who kept emergency shipping labels in 3 desk drawers. Still, I began looking up when a blue shape moved in the edge of my vision. Friday was the crew's final day on our elevation. Rain had cleared before dawn, leaving the sky cold and bright. The woman reached my row of windows just after 3. I had spent the afternoon resolving a shortage of insulated containers. The containers existed. The warehouse record said they did not. 2 hospitals needed them by Monday, and the person responsible for the count had gone home sick. At 3:10, I found the missing pallet in a photo attached to the wrong receiving record. At 3:11, the woman in blue lowered into view. I raised both hands in victory. She laughed. I could not hear it, but I saw it. She cleaned the pane to my left, checked something on her line, and moved in front of me. Her radio sounded. She answered, waited, and looked toward the roof. Then she returned her attention to the glass. She applied soap in a broad rectangle. Instead of lifting the squeegee, she pressed one finger to the foam. Dinner? The word was large, plain, and impossible to misunderstand. She added a small arrow pointing at herself. My mind, trained to create alternatives before approving any movement, offered several useless questions. Was she serious? Had I misread the arrow? Could dinner mean a group dinner with an entire window cleaning crew? She tapped the question mark. I stopped planning. I grabbed the first sheet of paper I could reach and wrote "yes." The marker was running dry. The word looked pale. I traced it twice and held it against the glass. Her smile arrived slowly, then all at once. She wrote 6:30 lobby beneath the question. I held up a thumb. She pointed at the clock, pointed at me, and gave me a look that clearly meant not 2:30. I crossed my heart. She squeeged the invitation away, detailed the edges of the pane with a cloth, and descended toward the next floor. For the rest of the afternoon, my window was the cleanest thing in the office. At 6:25, I stood in the lobby wearing the same blue shirt I had worn all day, and wondering whether I should have brought a second shirt to work. At 6:32, she came through the side entrance carrying a gear bag. Without the helmet and jacket, she looked both familiar and new. She had dark hair pulled into a low knot, gray-green eyes, and a narrow face that seemed serious until she smiled. She wore black work trousers and a clean charcoal sweater. A faded red mark crossed one cheek where a helmet strap had rested. She stopped in front of me. "You are Miles," she said. I looked down at my identification badge. "You had access to privileged information. You held it against the glass yesterday when you were explaining the late truck." "That sounds like me." She offered her hand. "Leah Danner." Her grip was warm and firm. "Do you always ask men out from the side of a building?" I asked. "First time. Do you always take 4 days to introduce yourself?" There was a window in the way. "Useful excuse." She adjusted the gear bag on her shoulder. "I need to put this in my truck, then dinner, if your paper was legally binding." I traced it twice. "Good. I was worried about the ink quality." Her truck was parked in a service bay, with her company's name printed on the door. Danner Access and Glass. Not a slogan. Not a picture of someone hanging dramatically from a rope. Just the name and a phone number. Leah locked the gear bag inside a steel compartment, checked the door, and led me to a noodle place 2 blocks away. She had chosen it during lunch after looking through the glass at a map on my office wall. "You could read that from outside?" I asked when we sat down. I could read noodles in red letters. I made an inference. That is how bad routing decisions happen. "Do you object to noodles?" "No, your inference survived validation." We ordered at the counter and took a table near the back. For the first few minutes, we talked about the obvious thing. Leah had spent 11 years in high-rise window cleaning and rope access. She had started on ground crews, moved through formal training and supervised hours, and eventually become a lead technician. 3 years earlier, she had bought a truck, hired 2 experienced technicians, and opened her own company. "How many people assume you are fearless?" I asked. "Most of them." "Are you?" "No, fearless people skip checks because they think confidence is equipment." She tore a paper wrapper from her chopsticks. "I am careful. I trust systems I have verified. Those are different things." "What happens if the wind changes?" "We stop if conditions leave the plan. What happens if a truck carrying refrigerated medication breaks down?" "We move the load into a qualified replacement vehicle, verify temperatures, update the receiving sites, and document every minute." "Do you panic?" "Afterward, privately, if time permits." "Then we have similar jobs. Yours has a better view. Yours has chairs." The food arrived. Leah ate like someone who had worked outside for 9 hours. I liked that she did not pretend a bowl of noodles was a delicate event. She asked how long I had been in logistics. I told her I had started in a hospital receiving department after college, moved to a distributor, and discovered I was good at seeing where plans would fail before they failed in public. "That sounds exhausting," she said. "It is satisfying when it works. Nobody notices. They notice when it doesn't." She nodded. "Clean glass is like that. People see the view and forget the surface." It was the first moment that evening when the conversation became quiet without becoming uncertain. I looked at her hands around the bowl. The skin at her fingers was dry, despite the lotion she had probably used after work. A pale line crossed one knuckle. "Why me?" I asked. Leah met my eyes. "You looked at the person outside the window." Everyone looked. Most people looked at the equipment or the height. "You looked when I was just cleaning. Then you showed me your bad lunch and did not pretend you were too busy to be caught." Strong romantic qualifications. I had 4 days and a pane of glass. "You used the available data." "Exactly." She leaned back. "Why did you say yes?" "You were direct. You made me laugh without speaking. And I had spent 4 days hoping your section would reach my window again." Her expression softened. "Good answer." We stayed until the counter staff began wiping tables around us. Outside, Leah stopped beside her truck. "I would like to do this again," she said. "So would I." I asked the first time, Thursday 7. I choose the place. What kind of place? Ground level, stable surface, chairs. You know how to make a woman feel understood. She smiled and touched my sleeve. For 1 second I thought she might kiss me. Instead she said, Thursday, and got into her truck. I watched her drive away, then made myself stop standing in a loading bay with the expression of a man who had just been asked out through a building. For our second date, I chose a small restaurant in my neighborhood with 6 tables and a cook who refused substitutions unless the substitution improved the dish. Leah arrived in a dark green blouse and boots that had never been near soap water. You look different, I said. I took off the harness. That explains most of it. Careful. Still me, just less glass. We ate slowly. Away from the opening surprise, we had to learn whether we actually liked each other when both people could speak at the same time. We did. Leah was direct, but not careless. She could describe a difficult client without turning the person into a villain. She hated raisins, admired good masonry, and kept a notebook beside her bed because business problems arrived at 2 in the morning, whether invited or not. I told her I organized my kitchen by how often I use things and had once ended a relationship because both of us preferred avoiding conflict to admitting we wanted different lives. That cannot be the whole reason, she said. It is the honest short version. What is the longer version? We were polite until there was nothing intimate left. Leah considered that. I have done the opposite. Impolite, independent past the point of usefulness. My last serious boyfriend kept offering to take over the business side of my company because he thought field work was the real part. I responded by making sure he could help with nothing. That sounds efficient. It ended efficiently. She looked down at the table. I was right about him. I also made being right the only thing available. I did not tell her she had simply chosen the wrong man. It would have been an easy answer and an insulting one. What would you do differently? I asked. Ask before assuming help is control. Say no to the actual offer instead of every possible offer. That sounds difficult. It is. What would you do differently? Speak while the answer can still change something. She lifted her glass. To badly timed self-awareness. I touched mine to it. Better late than properly refrigerated. After dinner, we walked through my neighborhood. Nothing dramatic happened. No weather arrived. No emergency created a reason for us to touch. At a corner, Leah reached for my hand. I took hers. That was enough. Over the next month, we built a relationship in places that did not require either of us to be interesting on command. We had coffee on a Sunday morning and spent half an hour discussing whether the bakery's front window was genuinely clean. We went to a public lecture about city bridges. Leah cared about access systems used during inspections. I cared about how replacement parts were staged without closing roads. We both pretended this counted as variety. She came to my apartment and found the 3 drawers of shipping labels. Are these personal? She asked. The labels are no longer in service. Miles, some people keep stamps. Stamps have value. These have emotional significance. She closed the drawer with both hands. I visited her equipment yard on a Saturday after her crew had finished for the week. The yard was a fenced section behind a low industrial building. Ropes were stored clean, dry, and protected from chemicals and sunlight. Hardware had inspection records. Helmets sat on a shelf above labeled bins. Nothing looked casually dropped into a truck after a difficult day. Leah showed me the planning board for the next week. Each site listed weather limits, access points, building contacts, crew roles, and the location of the rescue kit. People see the rope, she said. The real work is this. She tapped the board. If we have to invent the plan after somebody is hurt, the plan is useless. I understood her better in that room than I had while watching her outside my window. Her competence was not the fact that she could hang 18 stories above a street. It was the fact that she had decided, long before leaving the ground, what would make the work stop. She did not ask me to inspect her system. She showed it because it was part of her life. I did not suggest improvements. That restraint would later prove less permanent than I hoped. We had lunch in her small office, sitting on folding chairs beside a desk covered in invoices. This is the glamorous owner portion, she said. I recognize it. Do you? I pointed at the stack nearest her elbow. 3 unpaid invoices, 1 insurance renewal, and a purchase order you disagree with. She narrowed her eyes. Can you actually read those? No, I know the shape of administrative despair. She laughed and leaned across the desk to kiss me. It was our first kiss. She paused close to my face, giving me time to meet her instead of merely receive it. I put my hand behind her neck and kissed her again. When we separated, Leah looked toward the planning board. I have wanted to do that since Thursday. The first Thursday or the second? The first. You waited a month? I was collecting data. Dangerous habit. You answered yes. I am answering yes again. The relationship changed after that without becoming a race. Leah stayed at my apartment for the first time 2 weeks later. The next morning, she stood barefoot in my kitchen, opened the label drawer by accident, and closed it without comment. That was intimacy. I spent a night at her apartment the following week. Her bedroom window opened onto a brick wall 6 feet away. Disappointed? She asked when she saw me looking at it. I expected a panoramic view. I spend enough time outside other people's windows. Her home was warm, practical, and completely separate from the visual stories strangers might invent about her. There were books stacked near the couch, a chipped blue bowl for keys, and a kitchen table scarred by years of use. She slept with one foot outside the blanket. I slept like a person receiving freight, squarely in the middle of the available space. We negotiated. In December, my employer held a volunteer packing day at our distribution center. Staff and their families assembled hygiene and wound care kits for community clinics. I invited Leah because I wanted her to see the part of my work that had people in it. She arrived in jeans and a red sweater, signed in like everyone else, and took a place at a packing table. An hour later, a delayed carton left one line without gauze pads. I stopped the line, shifted 2 unopened cartons from a later station, changed the replenishment route, and had every table moving again in 4 minutes. Leah watched from her station. Afterward, while we ate sandwiches in the break room, she said, "You become very calm when everyone else is confused. I become confused later. I thought you mostly worked with spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are where confusion is stored between events." She smiled. "I like seeing you here." I knew what she meant, not seeing my desk, seeing the reason I sat behind it. By January, we were exclusive without having drifted into the word. Leah brought it up at my kitchen table after dinner. "I am not seeing anyone else," she said. "Neither am I. I do not want to. Neither do I." That was almost suspiciously easy. Would you like a routing diagram? No, I would like you to say whether this is a relationship. It is a relationship. I want it to be one. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. Good. So do I. She left a toothbrush at my apartment that night. I gave her a key 3 weeks later. I did not hide it in soap or attach it to an elaborate gesture. I put it on the table and told her it was for convenience, not a request to move in. Leah picked it up. "Did you label it?" "No." "Growth." She gave me her key the next weekend. We used them carefully. A key did not cancel a knock. Access did not mean availability. If one of us needed a quiet night, we said so before the other person crossed the city with dinner. For several months, the relationship felt strong in an ordinary way. Then I opened a professional door Leah had not asked me to open. My company was preparing a second distribution center on the west side. I was part of the launch team because the new site would handle temperature-controlled supplies. My job covered receiving patterns, emergency routes, and inventory placement. It did not cover building services. During a planning meeting, the facilities coordinator said the new center needed bids for exterior glass cleaning and periodic high-access work. "Do you know anyone?" the coordinator asked the room. I did. The right answer was to tell Leah about the opportunity and ask whether she wanted the public bid information. Instead, I gave the coordinator her company name. I told myself it was only a vendor suggestion. The procurement team would qualify every company. I would not evaluate the bid. Leah's work was good. Businesses grew through referrals all the time. Every sentence was technically true. Together, they let me skip the question that mattered. Did she want me to connect our relationship to her business? The procurement team sent Danner Access and Glass an invitation to bid. The message said her company had been recommended by a member of the launch team. Leah called me at 4 that afternoon. Her voice was controlled. "Did you give my name to your company?" I looked at the planning board on my office wall. "Yes, for the West Side Center." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I should have." That is not an answer. The opportunity came up in a meeting. I knew you were qualified. I gave them your company name. I am not part of the bid review. Do they know we are together? The question exposed the part of the situation I had avoided examining. No. Then they think this is an ordinary professional recommendation. I recommended your work. You recommended work you have never hired, supervised, or inspected. You know my planning. You have seen my yard. You have never been my client. I stood up, then sat down again because there was nowhere useful to go. You're right. I am qualified, Miles. That does not make your process clean. I can disclose the relationship and step away. You should have asked before my company name entered your process. She was not shouting. That made it worse. I thought I was helping, I said. You thought visibility was always help. I had no answer. Leah continued. I spent years building a company that can stand behind its own bids. Now I either decline or I submit and wonder whether everyone thinks I got invited because I sleep with someone on the launch team. I am not evaluating it. You are still on the team. Yes. The word felt smaller than the one I had held against the glass months earlier. I am declining the invitation, she said. You do not have to do that. Do not tell me what I have to do with my company. I closed my eyes. You're right, I'm sorry. I need tonight alone. Okay. And do not fix this by finding me a different contract. I won't. She ended the call. I stayed at my desk for another hour without pretending I was working. The mistake was not complicated. I had taken something I admired about Leah and used it as permission. I had treated my confidence in her as more important than her control over where her company appeared. At 6, I wrote to the facilities coordinator and procurement lead. I stated that I had a personal relationship with the owner of Danner Access and Glass, that I had submitted the name without consulting her, and that I was withdrawing the recommendation. I asked for the company to be removed from the invited list because the owner had not consented to the referral. I also asked to be excluded from any present or future vendor discussion involving her company. I copied our compliance contact. The message was embarrassing. That was appropriate. The next morning, procurement confirmed that Leah's decline and my disclosure were documented. Her company had been removed. I would have no involvement if she ever responded independently to a public solicitation. I forwarded the confirmation to Leah with one paragraph. I opened a professional door without asking and created a conflict you had to absorb. I have corrected the record and recuse myself. I will not refer your company again unless you explicitly ask. I am sorry. You do not need to answer now. Then I waited. Waiting without manufacturing another solution was harder than it should have been. Leah did not answer that day. She sent one message the following morning. I received it. I need time, I wrote back. Take it. For 6 days we did not see each other. We were not officially separated. We were not functioning as a couple either. Her toothbrush remained in my bathroom. Her key remained on my ring because taking it off felt like making another decision before a conversation. On the 7th evening, Leah asked to meet at the noodle place from our first date. She was already seated when I arrived. No work clothes, no blue jacket, no glass. Just Leah at a table, turning a water glass slowly between her hands. I sat across from her. Thank you for coming, she said. Of course. She looked tired. I declined the bid before I called you. I know. I was angry because you put me in that position. I was also angry because part of me wanted the contract. It is larger than anything my company has handled under one agreement. I listened. That does not excuse what I did, I said. No. I know. She studied my face. You corrected it cleanly, after creating it. Both are true. The server brought menus. Neither of us opened them. Leah folded her hands on the table. I need you to understand why it hit me so hard. My old relationship turned every part of my business into a problem he could solve. Clients, invoices, staffing. If I accepted one suggestion, he treated it as authority over the next decision. I am not him. The sentence left my mouth before judgment could stop it. Leah's expression tightened. I raised one hand. That was defensive. I am sorry. I am not him. But I did one thing that belonged to the same pattern. You should not have to ignore that to protect my feelings. Her shoulders lowered slightly. Thank you. I thought support meant using what access I had. I did not ask what support meant to you. Sometimes it will mean opening a door. Then you ask, or I ask, before touching it. Yes. Sometimes it means dinner after a bad day. Often? That I can do. A small smile moved across her mouth and disappeared. I also did something I don't like, she said. I assumed the worst version of why you did it. I knew you were proud of me. I knew you were not trying to control the company. I still took 6 days because I was afraid accepting your apology would mean accepting the behavior. You were allowed to take 6 days. I know, I am telling you what happened inside them. There was no perfect balance to establish. My mistake did not become smaller because Leah had fear around it. Her fear did not become irrational because I had intended support. We ordered noodles. By the time the bowls arrived, we had agreed on 2 rules. Neither of us would refer, volunteer, schedule, purchase, or promise the other person's professional time without asking. And asking would include enough information for a real no. That sounds like a policy, Leah said. Policies exist because memory becomes generous under pressure. You really know how to restore romance. I can add a candle. Do not set anything on fire. After dinner, we stood outside under the red restaurant sign. Are we okay? I asked. Leah looked at me. We are repairing. That is not the same answer. No, it is more honest. She took my hand. I understood then that repair was not a return to the moment before harm. It was a new state with the history still inside it. We walked to her truck together. She kissed me before she left. Not as proof that the problem had vanished, as a choice to continue. 2 months later, Leah's company won a contract to clean and inspect access conditions at 3 hospital towers. The opportunity came through a property firm she had worked for before she met me. I learned about it when she arrived at my apartment carrying takeout in a folder. I want to ask for help, she said. I put down the plate I was holding. All right. I do not want vendor contacts. I do not want you to review pricing. I do not want you to speak to the client. Understood. The first tower starts Sunday at 5 in the morning. I will be finished by 2 if the weather holds. I want to know whether you will be at my apartment afterward with food. The request was so specific that I almost laughed. I did not. Yes, what food? Soup, bread, something I can reheat if the wind shuts us down, and I am 4 hours late. Any logistical constraints? No raisins. That is a quality constraint. Miles, soup and bread, your apartment. No client contact. Thank you. She kissed me. On Sunday, I did exactly what she asked. I did not drive to the hospital to watch. I did not text while she was on rope. I made soup, bought bread, and waited at her apartment with a book. At 3:20, Leah came through the door smelling of cold air and clean water. She dropped her bag, sat beside me on the couch, and rested her head on my shoulder. How did it go? I asked. Good, long. 1 anchor location changed after the pre-use check, so we re-rigged from the approved alternate. Everyone's safe? Everyone's safe. Building happy. I am tired enough to become unreasonable about bread. I brought her soup. That afternoon mattered more to our relationship than any contract I could have found her. She had asked, I had listened, the support fit the opening she made for it. By summer, we had been together 8 months. Our lives overlapped in ways no key could summarize. Leah kept 2 shirts in my closet and complained that I hung them too far apart. I kept coffee at her apartment that she considered too dark, but drank when hers ran out. We had learned how to ask for company without inventing a task. We had also learned that 2 apartments created a surprising amount of driving for people who both woke before 6. One Thursday, Leah came to my apartment with a printed rental listing. She placed it on the kitchen table but kept one hand over the address. This is not a decision, she said. Strong disclaimer. It is an unfinished conversation. I sat across from her. All right. My lease ends in 4 months. Yours ends in 6. I am here most nights, or you were at mine. I would like to discuss choosing a place together. Discuss, not approve. Discuss. You may discover that living with me is impossible once you understand how many drying racks exist. I have 3 drawers of obsolete labels. I am negotiating from weakness. She moved her hand from the address. The listing was for a small house between her equipment yard and my new distribution center. It had 2 bedrooms, a garage, and windows that opened. I do not want to run the business from home, Leah said. The garage would be for our things, not company gear. I want both names on the lease. I want a second room where either of us can close a door without it meaning the relationship is in danger. I want to see at least 5 places. Of course you do. I want expenses divided by income, not exactly in half. Agreed. I want the label drawers. 1 drawer. 2. 1 in a box in the garage. I need time to consider this aggression. Leah reached across the table. There is another part. I took her hand. She looked directly at me. I love you. I do not want to choose a house because it is efficient. I want to choose one because I want an ordinary life with you inside it. Her voice was steady. Her thumb was not. It moved once against my palm. I thought about the first question she had written through soap. She had made herself clear while hanging outside a sealed window, then waited for me to answer. This was harder. There was no glass to absorb the risk. I love you too, I said. I want the ordinary life. I want the early alarms and the late trucks and the days when support means soup. I want you to ask before you open my doors, and I want to do the same for you. Leah's eyes closed for 1 second. When they opened, she was smiling. 5 houses? She asked. At least. We viewed 7. One had a garage that smelled permanently of gasoline. One placed my commute directly across a school pickup route Leah described as a daily systems failure. One had beautiful windows and no useful storage. 2 were too expensive. One had a landlord who called Leah's business a hobby before learning what it was. We left before he finished the sentence. The 7th house was plain brick with a narrow backyard, a dry garage, and a kitchen window over the sink. Both bedrooms had doors. Both names went on the lease. We moved in on a Saturday with hired movers because Leah's crew cleaned buildings and was not a free-moving company. I labeled the boxes. She ignored several labels and found the correct rooms anyway. That night, we ate noodles on the floor beneath the kitchen window. The glass is dirty, Leah said. Professional opinion? Personal observation. Are you offering a service? She looked at me. Careful. I will clean the inside if you clean the outside. That is a domestic agreement. No invoice? Acceptable. A year after Leah wrote on my office window, Danner Access and Glass had added a crew lead and a second vehicle. Leah still worked on rope, but she no longer treated every day away from the facade as evidence that she was becoming less real. She trained, she planned. She chose the jobs that fit the company she wanted. My new distribution center opened without her company on the vendor list. That remained the correct outcome. I ran the temperature-controlled launch, found 3 problems before the first shipment arrived, and spent the opening week eating lunch at almost noon. Leah considered that her influence. The West Side Center had a second-floor office with ordinary windows. They were cleaned by a company selected through procurement. I did not know the owner. I did not offer notes. At home, Leah and I kept a small whiteboard beside the kitchen door. It held anything that affected both of us before it became a finished decision. Potential contracts did not go there unless Leah wanted them there. My staffing changes did not go there unless they changed our time. The board was not permission. It was visibility by agreement. One Sunday morning, I found Leah outside the kitchen window with a bucket and squeegee. She stood on the ground, no harness, no helmet, no 18-story drop beneath her boots. She covered the outside pane in soap and looked through at me. I picked up a marker and a sheet of paper. Before I could write, she traced a word with her finger. Breakfast? I held up. Yes. Leah laughed, squeegeed the question away, and came inside. You could have used the door, I said. I did not need to. Was that a professional technique? No, the edges were poor. I handed her a towel. She took it, then pulled me close by the front of my shirt. I love you, she said. I love you too. Your turn to cook. That was not in the question. It was implied by the routing. I made eggs while she dried the glass. The window was no longer sealed. We could open it whenever we wanted. Most days, we used the door. The important part was that neither of us opened one for the other without asking.